Lily, Max, thanks so much for joining us at Think Tank. One of the first things that stood out to me, Lily, about your opening was just about talking about that speed of change that's happened. Is that unexpected for you, about how rapid that acceleration has occurred?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of debate about whether or not large language models are truly going to be like the real AI technology that gets us to artificial general intelligence. So for us to now be where we are several months later, where we're seeing tools like Claude Cowork and Claude Code and just agentic, AI search just changing and evolving so rapidly and being able to do so many things, I think we're in definitely that exponential part of the curve, and AI is learning from itself now. So it's happening much more quickly than I think I and many others anticipated, and it's honestly a little scary where things are going to go from here.
Yeah.
If you kind of look past the top lines, like Claude's coming in real hot because they focused and they said, right, we're going to be the thing that helps you at work and just focus on that, and that's proven to be really valuable. And I feel like there's a good chance that someone will come along and say, we are going to be the one that really helps you shop, or that really helps you as a creative partner or something. And so like as that happens, there's going to be a whole cascade of changes and innovation too.
Is the industry actually prepared for this? Is it actually, well set to kind of deal with this level of revolution? Because
of how early everything is, like it's really an open question, like how much one can capitalize on it. There's a big opportunity, I think, to raise the profile of affiliate publishers, of making affiliate agencies much more of a kind of strategic component in how brands think about their marketing spending.
Like, I think it's more of a mixed bag for a lot of the clients and everything that we speak to, because on one hand, yes, like there's so much new opportunity to use AI to create, automations and create efficiencies in your workflow and to vibe code new things and create all these types of new products and everything. So on that end, people are very excited. There's all kinds of like inspiration for building new things in a way that we couldn't do before. And on the other side, especially with publishers, there's just a lot of concern, a lot of fear, because I think, tools like Google's AI mode, which is potentially rolling out any day now as the default version of search, they just fundamentally cut into traffic that many companies have been used to receiving from organic search for a long time.
I do think we're still so early that the notion that some company is going to be like, I've got a new metric and a new system, and like that person's going to materialize in the next 6 months is, I think, a little misguided. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a bit unclear right now. I think one of the things I tried to get at in the presentation is the fact that, so according to some of the data that I looked at, 1 in 4 of the most heavily cited or retrieved sites in ChatGPT's top 100 most cited domains is technically an affiliate or a product review site. So a lot of these businesses have, for decades now, have been in the business of driving page views and monetizing through page views. And I think that that's an interesting conundrum, right? Where it's like these language models need that content, but they're not necessarily sending out that traffic anymore. So I think we're at the early days of having these conversations, and I think that we probably are going to need a lot more almost like existential conversations with the Googles and the OpenAIs about, if you need our content, we need to make sure that we're getting some value in return.
Yeah. So do you think it's those kind of first principles of SEO, EAT, is still basically going to be the kind of governing model of what content is going to be performing well?
So EAT is experience, expertise, authority, and trust. It's EEAT. That's the fundamental way that I think a lot of this works, and I think that what Google and eventually OpenAI are really going to be looking for. But Google actually has its own criteria for writing good reviews. A lot of people don't know this. So you can actually go onto Google and say, Google's guidelines for writing review content, and they have like 20 or 30 questions that they ask site owners to think about when they're producing review content. So check those first.
Yeah.
The decision for some of these publishers or brand sites that actually block AI bots, I don't know if you can speak a little bit to that, or maybe like what are the pros of that? What are the cons? Why would a site not want to be cited?
The thinking, and a lot of big companies, for example, New York Times are already doing this, where they're saying our content is so valuable that we don't want it being scraped and repurposed for free. If all the big affiliate companies banded together and blocked OpenAI or Gemini or all the different LLMs from being able to access, whether it's some of their content, all of their content, the LLMs are going to have no choice but to reach out and say, we need that content back. So what do you guys need for it, right? So I think these kind of conversations around like licensing of proprietary data, I think needs to continue to happen, because the ecosystem can't support itself if they're just able to take everybody's information for free. But I don't know if it's realistic. I think there's more and more, like I hear more and more events happening with the AI companies and the publishing industry to kind of have these conversations about what's fair. But I would recommend that at the very least, companies are putting pressure. I know, we have the EU and everything putting a lot of pressure on these AI companies, because at the end of the day, they're just going to continue to take everybody's content until they can't. So we have to do something.
We interviewed an affiliate publisher in the UK called Ufurnish. They're a kind of interior furnishings comparison website. They had like an interesting take, I think, on LLM citations and wanting to be present there. Less so for the referral traffic and more so for the brand equity. And that, I think, is maybe gets sometimes lost in the anxiety that the industry has around referral traffic. And to your kind of research, the fact that there is so little click-throughs that we're seeing from these kind of overviews.
It's a moving target, but like broadly, when you look at consumer perception of like AI responses, like they're broadly perceived as trustworthy, right? Like it's not 100%, but it's well over 50. And so if you are, kind of a challenger brand or challenger publisher, and you can't kind of break through in what have been legacy kind of distribution surfaces, like you probably do look at this a little bit differently. When it's a chance to sort of be on the same plane as your, bigger, better funded competitors. So so that I think that's absolutely a valid thing to think about.
I argue that one of the best things you can do is to be as visible as possible in search for the questions that you care about. Literally, like try to rank number one in search. But beyond that, there's certain types of pages that are doing really well. So we've seen there's a lot of debate in this space right now, but like listicles. So like 10 list items that kind of rank certain products or whatever, or comparison pages that might compare two different companies to one another, question and answer pages and FAQ pages. So really anything that's like really easy for an agent or a large language model to come to the page and say, we see a really clear answer to this question in one place that we can pull in really easily. Before you might have had the answer kind of dispersed throughout the content, but now having like one block that really answers the question. So we're kind of just like tightening things up in the content. So it's easier for them when they come in, they don't have to scan the entire page to get the point. They find one block that really answers the question.
Yeah. You mentioned at the very start there about like the correlation between kind of core SEO principles and what's then earning AI visibility. What are the differences there? Where are the kind of the things that maybe don't matter as much as a signal for Google search, for instance, that do matter more for LLMs?
What the LLMs are doing is they're not only pulling from the top ranking results, that's one part of the process, but they're trying to corroborate what they found with third-party information. So they're looking at, what do people on Reddit say about this? What do people on LinkedIn say about it? Backlinking and off-site metrics have always mattered a lot for SEO. I think we've been very, very focused on building links. Now we're much more focused on, what are people saying about our brand? How many times is our brand mentioned across relevant sources that the LLMs are looking at? So it becomes much more of like a PR activity.
Adrian on the panel from Linkbee earlier talked about the fact that this feels very much like a Wild West gold rush era right now, advantages to the first movers. When you compare this, what's happening right now in the LLM space particularly, to the early days of SEO, and you've been working, was it 16 years? Yeah. Are there parallels here?
There's absolutely parallels. Yeah. I talk a lot about what I call the cycle of SEO. So basically the idea is, there's some type of new opportunity or set of opportunities that SEOs discover now, GEOs and AEOs, AI search people discover. They all kind of shout from the mountaintops, right? Google hates this. They don't want people trying to manipulate their search algorithms, and I'm sure OpenAI is starting to see the same thing with a lot of the spam in ChatGPT. So they patch it, they introduce algorithm updates and penalties and things like this, and that tactic stops working, and then we're right back to square one where we need to find new tactics, right? And I think right now we're absolutely in a gold rush where there's all kinds of ways that people are trying to trick, AI responses and manipulate what appears in there.
They have to be, I think, very vigilant from a branding and kind of, future growth perspective. If they want that stuff to continue, they're going to have to, crack down on this stuff a lot more quickly.
What we've seen with SEO over the years is you would have been better off not doing those things in the first place, even if it worked for 6 months. Where it lands you after those 6 months, it's often very, very hard to recover.
Yeah.
You mentioned this is kind of like through your career, the last 16 years, this has been like the most exciting thing that has come into the space as an update, or like as all these things are changing. I guess, could you maybe elaborate on that?
Historically, it's been very, very hard to get companies and clients to take SEO seriously. We've always had attribution challenges. We've always had, it takes a long time to see results and everything. But suddenly everyone's like, how do I show up in large language models? And it's like, well, you want to make sure your search is buttoned up. So I think it's exciting for us, not only because we are able to do so many SEO workflows and processes so much more quickly with AI. That part's very exciting. We're also able to build things we could never build before because now suddenly everybody can be a developer with things like Claude Code. But just the fact that clients are enthusiastic about SEO, for more enthusiastic than they've ever been in the 16 years I've been doing this.
Creators, as a kind of like publisher class, are potentially going to have huge role to play in GEO and affiliate as well, because as we talked about on stage, like LLMs really value feedback from regular people. They really value creator content, user-generated content. You see that in the responses, like the top 10 sites that are cited most frequently, the domains, half of them are just basically like repositories of creator content. This sort of like comparison information, specific specs, context-specific information about products or services. That's not necessarily always going to wind up in a creator post, right? But what I think you will start to see among a certain class of creators is kind of a development of a parallel content operation where it's like, I've got this one post that like, there's a portion of it that's really funny that I'll put on TikTok, but there's a more kind of in-depth, sober, like, now I'm going to take this apart and show you like why I actually think this is great. And maybe I put that on YouTube. Maybe I like, you know, cut it up into things that I distribute on LinkedIn, whatever. And so you have this ability to really give the LLMs and the brand partners a chance to, you know, appear in really important contexts.
Google really seems to be prioritizing YouTube in AI-generated responses, and I think they just get so much of that great, authentic, kind of human conversation within the video that it often answers a lot of the questions people are asking about. But I do think video, audio, images, all of this is a new playing field because LLMs are able to understand a lot of that content much better. But I would still recommend, you know, make sure if you're uploading videos and things to your site that you're looking at transcripts. I think YouTube does it automatically, but not every video provider does, but that transcript is really going to help kind of solidify what they know about the video. I think right now we're in this phase where certain things, so I give the example of what I call self-promotional listicles. So you can put a blog on your website that says, who are the best companies in our category? And then you list your competitors at 2 through 10, but number 1 is your own company. So a lot of people have made not only one of these articles, but 500 or in some cases 2,000 such articles on their website. And the reality is eventually Google usually catches on to this. It's a version of spam according to Google. We've had so many of these in Google's history where they're going to go against exploitative GEO tactics, and you're not going to want to be wiped out from Google search with all this stuff. So you just have to be very careful.